trial. Here is where I will defend the situation. Before you call me a monster and an animal for defending the situation, I will say this. The cop was following the procedure.
Never said I oppose fracking. Show the tape. Put it on your website. Put it on the website.
Live from Clark Studios in Rochester, New York. Broadcasting around the world. You're listening to You Made It Political, where the voice of the keyboard warrior is finally heard and the arguments presented are put to the political test. And now, here's your host, Matt Clark.
There is no doubt whatsoever that what Derek Chauvin did to George Floyd was completely unacceptable, inappropriate on all levels, and unnecessary. It did not have to happen. So much could have gone differently that day where the outcome would have been a lot more positive. There's no disputing that. But the country is full of mixed emotions. And the reason is because most of us aren't convinced that although what Chauvin did was wrong, he wasn't given a fair trial. The mob, the media, the woke left have hijacked our judicial system. There's no disputing that whatsoever. It was 100% influenced by the likes of Maxine Waters and every other leftist and mob mentality influencer out there that dictated the decision from the jurors. This case, from start to finish, did not stand a chance. And it's sad. It's a sad day in America when our judicial system is now ruled by mob mentality rather than the jurors, who are supposed to be deciding with unbiased, with lack of emotion, and they're supposed to just stick to the facts. And I, as well as thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of lawyers who have a legal conscience, would agree that this case was not tried fairly. And there's proof to that, and we'll take a look at all of that in today's show. We're going to start today's show with and by listening to Alan Dershowitz. Alan Dershowitz is a very well-known constitutional lawyer and a criminal lawyer who's going to weigh in and talk about what he thinks about the case and why he, too, thinks that this case was not tried fairly. Let's get into the show.
Dispatched at 4:35 p.m., and the first officers arrived at scene at 4:44 p.m.
So we're going to listen to
show you is
Alan Dershowitz first, as soon as we can kill this audio coming in from another source. So Alan Dershowitz, he says the possible legal path to a Chauvin reversal. Alan Dershowitz has been very vocal. He claims and says that threats and intimidation and hanging the sword of Damocles over the jury seeped into the jury room. I think this case should be reversed on appeal. So we already have several lawyers already weighing in and saying that they feel, based on how the media and politicians and celebrities have so dangerously influenced this case, they believe this case should be reversed based on appeal. Now, before you start attacking every single person out there who believes this or agrees with this, we're not arguing whether Chauvin was right or wrong. That's not the argument. You'd have to be an absolute idiot to think that Chauvin was right in his behavior. He was not right in his behavior. It was criminal what he did. Nobody's disputing that. He deserves absolutely manslaughter. Murder, I'm not convinced. Murder one, murder two, you get that when you intentionally try to kill somebody. I'm not convinced Chauvin intentionally tried or meant or premeditated to murder George Floyd. Did he kill him by accident? Maybe. That's probably the better charge. But today's discussion is not to dispute whether I believe he was right or wrong. Today's dispute is to discuss whether he was given a fair trial or not. Let's listen to what Alan Dershowitz has to say about this situation.
Well, first, what was done to George Floyd by Officer Chauvin was inexcusable morally. But the verdict is very questionable because of the outside influences of people like Al Sharpton and people like Maxine Waters. Their threats and intimidation and hanging the sort of Damocles over the jury and basically saying if you don't convict on the murder charge on all the charges, the cities will burn, the country will be destroyed, seeped into the jury room because the judge made a terrible mistake by not sequestering the jury. So the judge himself said this case may be reversed on appeal. And I think it might be reversed on appeal. I think it should be reversed on appeal. I think the American Civil Liberties Union, which would be all over this case if it weren't a racially charged case, all Americans who care about due process and liberty should be concerned that the jury verdict may have been influenced by, if not the thumb, maybe even the elbow of the outside pressures, the fears, the threats. Every juror in that room knew about these threats. And when they sit and deliberate, they have to be saying to themselves, consciously or unconsciously, if I were to render a verdict other than a murder verdict, what the consequences will be for me, my family, my friends, my business, that should never, ever be allowed to seep into a jury room. So I have no real confidence that this verdict, which may be correct in some ways, but I have no confidence that this verdict was produced by due process and the rule of law rather than the influence of the crowd.
So it's very clear. I mean, this is what Alan Dershowitz thinks. This is exactly how I feel about this entire case. Again, he even said, listen, the dispute here isn't whether the jurors got it wrong, which a lot of lawyers would claim they have, because it's kind of contradictory to convict somebody of both manslaughter and murder, 1 and 2, all at the same time. I mean, usually you'd have to pick one or other. You either intended to do it or you didn't intend to do it. Ben Shapiro even weighed in and said, this is wrong, because you can't have all three. It just doesn't make legal sense. You're either fully acquitted of all three charges because essentially they contradict each other, or you're convicted of manslaughter or of murder 1 or murder 2. So the fact that the jury actually convicted them of all three just goes to prove how influenced this entire case was. That they were thinking emotionally, irrationally, and Alan Dershowitz goes on to say, listen, a juror should never be feared for his life. He should never fear for his or her family or family's life. That should never, ever seep into the courtroom. And it has. You cannot tell me it hasn't. If you tell me it hasn't, you're only kidding yourself and you're lying to yourself. And it only goes to show how ignorant most people are right now when they talk like that. Because it absolutely did. These jurors were scared shitless from the second they were called upon for jury duty in this case. Alan Dershowitz also goes on to say that he 100% believes that all Americans should be concerned with this right now. He believes that they should all be concerned about the fact that this case was so poorly tried because of the fact that the influence of this case was seeped in to the court case. So it was horribly tried. It was awful. Let's listen to what else he has to say here.
To the United States Supreme Court. And I think the United States Supreme Court holds the best possibility for the defense of getting this conviction reversed on the ground that the judge himself suggested. The statements made by people outside the courtroom essentially intimidating jurors and telling them that if they don't come to the, quote, right verdict, there will be violence and consequences and their own lives may be affected. Jurors should never, ever have that fear or influence in their verdicts.
So they were 100% influenced. They had the fear. beaten into them by the likes of Maxine Waters and other politicians. Let's take a look at the keyboard warrior cam and see what others have to say about the completely disgusting and very dangerous behavior by a lot of the outside influence that seeped into the courtroom during this case. Rich said the jurors feared for their lives. No justice was served. They were even threatened by Congresswoman Maxine Waters. A $100 million lawsuit against Waters could come in real handy for his appeal. And I absolutely think this. Yes, Maxine should not have run her mouth. But it didn't just start with Maxine Waters. Somebody commented on my post and they say, well, this case shouldn't be reversed just because of what Maxine Waters said. And you're right. It shouldn't. It should be reversed because of the influence that was had on this case from start to finish. It did not stand a chance. It should never have even been tried in Minneapolis to begin with. But I'm not sure that's even a decision that anybody's able to make. I mean, it occurred in that area, therefore it should be tried in that local area. But this case did not stand a chance from start to finish. It failed miserably as far as unbiased decision is concerned. So I agree with Rich. Maxine Waters is a big part of it, but it goes beyond that. This goes much further than one person influencing this decision. Beverly says, I know this jury has been weighed down with this huge task. I pray for justice. I also pray for peace for both families after this. Let there be peace in the streets, too. Beverly, that's a nice thought. It's wishful thinking because there's been nothing but unrest in the streets, which also goes to show that Black Lives Matter, Antifa, they're not going to stop. And we'll listen to Grant Stitchfield in just a minute from Newsmax to discuss more about that. And he's going to highlight all the violence that's been going on and how Black Lives Matter have already come out and said, this is not enough. We're not stopping until the police are abolished. Well, guys, I'm sorry. I hate to say it. No one's abolishing the police. We're not defunding the damn police, okay? Because as long as our politicians need security, law enforcement's not going anywhere. We're not going to have law enforcement for Nancy Pelosi, but not for Matt Clark, or not for you guys watching this video. Okay, we're not going to have law enforcement for some and not for others. So it's ridiculous to say that they're not going to stop until they abolish the police. It's an absolute asinine thing to say. Dave says, responding to a different comment, yes, Alan, that's what it takes to get justice in America, so be it. You didn't think that way when the right tried to overthrow the democracy, did you? I'm not sure who he was referring to. He was referring to somebody else. Michael says, you need to concentrate on how to best distance yourself from your friend Epstein instead of spewing nonsense, Mr. Dershowitz. So people are obviously giving him a hard time. And listen, I don't know why everybody's giving these guys such a hard time. Michael says this case will never be reversed, although certainly it will go through the usual endless appeals at the expense of the American public. See, I wish people would stop thinking with emotion and start thinking logically here. Do I think Derek Chauvin should have been acquitted on all three accounts? Of course not. Do I think he should have gotten manslaughter? Yes. I don't need to be a lawyer to understand that he should have definitely gotten some sort of conviction charge here. I think it was crazy what he did. And I think for him to do that in front of the cameras was absolutely insane. I don't know what Derek Chauvin was thinking. I don't know how he possibly could have thought that he wasn't going to get some sort of backlash or some sort of charge against him for what he did to George Floyd. It was just completely unacceptable and unnecessary. But I also like to think with logic. This case, if it was just tried without all the media influence, the political influence, without celebrities going up against and BLM on the doorsteps of every single or doorsteps of the courtroom constantly for days pressuring that jury, then sure, I would have been okay with the verdict. Again, although it contradicts itself, I still don't see how you can have a murder 1 and 2 conviction charge alongside with a manslaughter charge. They completely contradict each other. And if there's any lawyers watching this live, please comment below because I'd love to know what you think. But I've also looked and read what dozens of criminal law and constitutional lawyers have had to say about this, and they're just as stumped as I am. Beverly says Waters is dismissive of the rules of society and doesn't care what her words do to innocent people. Democrat leaders are okay inciting violence in poor minority communities because they so rarely live in the community. She's right. Maxine Waters doesn't live there on the ground. What the hell is she coming in there, stirring the pot for, getting the city all riled up before the election? She went in there 100% to intimidate the jurors, to intimidate the judicial system. She went in there with the sole purpose of influencing this case. 100%. She should have kept her mouth shut. And the judge even came, he had said it on camera in the courtroom that day. I wouldn't be very surprised if you now have grounds for an appeal based on what these politicians keep saying. I wouldn't be surprised if this case got reversed on appeal because of the influence that was had on this case. And he's right. He's absolutely right. And he's basically hinting, you guys should probably appeal this because that was wrong. Is the judge trying to influence the case? No. Any lawyer will know that. What was happened was wrong. The fact that the judge straight up came out and said it leads me to believe that everybody was already thinking it. He just was putting on his honorable judge hat and speaking from a position of fairness, because that's what judges do, or at least they're supposed to. They don't all do that, but most of them do it. So I found an article also by Ben Shapiro, and Ben Shapiro's had a lot to say about this, so is his team. I mean, these guys are lawyers. Ben Shapiro, it was also nice listening to what Adam Walsh had to say, Michael Knowles, and Candace Owens. The whole crew did a live the other day, and I watched some of it. And they had a lot of really good things to say. Candace Owens says Chauvin verdict is mob rule. Trial polluted from start to finish. And again, you can't, first of all, you can't call Candace Owens racist. She's black, for Christ's sake. Okay? She has made herself very clear that what happened was wrong. That Chauvin was an absolute jackass, an idiot, and a complete criminal. But she too believes this case wasn't tried fairly. So let's take a look at what happened here, or what they had to say about this. So Candace Owens' Chauvin verdict is mob rule, trial polluted from start to finish. And she, myself, and just thousands, tens of thousands, probably even millions of other people agree with this. This was mob rule mentality from start to finish. The mob came out in full effect to rule over this. Candace Owens hosted the Daily Wire's. Candace said the verdict in the trial of former police officer Derek Chauvin is a product of mob rule justice. Owens, along with the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro and Matt Walsh, slammed the verdict, as well as the media and Democrats' calls to gin up unrest, which they did. They all ginned up arrest. They came out and said, if this case is anything but what we expect it to be or demand that it be, we will burn down the cities. That is influence. You are influencing the jury right now. Because now the jury has to make a decision whether they're going to try the case fairly or they're going to watch America burn. Again, I don't care what you think about what Chauvin did was right or wrong. We're talking about the fact that the case was not tried fairly. It's the wrong verdict, in my opinion, and I think it's indicative of the fact that we now live in mob rule. Owens said, adding that Chauvin's trial was polluted from start to finish. So we all know that the jury convicted Chauvin on Tuesday of second-degree murder, third-degree murder, and second-degree manslaughter. The jury concluded that Chauvin had murdered George Floyd while arresting him for attempting to pass fake currency at a convenience store last year. We all know what happened. So Owens said, she goes on to say, that the media began manipulating the facts of the case and building a false narrative around Floyd almost the moment he died. So immediately we start to see this false narrative begin. She expressed surprise that the Minneapolis Police Department held on to police body cam footage of Floyd's arrest, while video shot by a bystander had echoed around the internet and the media for months playing the false narrative. Okay? So from the very beginning, Candace is saying this case never stood a chance. We've been playing the false narrative right from the beginning. When I watched the full tape, I was astonished that they didn't think to just at least add this context so that people understood, yes, this person was high out of his mind. He asked to be put on the ground. He was risking arrest. So everybody's like, and again, I'm going to weigh in on this too. We all know George Floyd was high as a kite, enough fentanyl to kill a horse. We all know that he asked to be taken out of the cop car to then be put on the ground. He was then resisting arrest. So you guys didn't see that. None of us saw that. The body cam footage shows all of that. But what the media keeps showing is the moment. They always show the 9 minutes that Chauvin had a knee on the neck. Okay? Why did he have a knee on the neck? Because George Floyd, even in handcuffs, continued to resist arrest. What are you supposed to do in that case? George Floyd claimed he was suffocating inside the police car. He then asked to be, or he was claustrophobic or something. He was then asked to be put outside. Okay, well, I can't just let you hang out. I got to put you on the ground. And to keep you from getting up and running away handcuffed or causing more of a scene or causing more resist, I need to restrain you somehow. He used the knee on the back, or the knee kind of on the back of the neck here, to restrain him. Where it went horribly wrong is when everybody around Floyd started to know that this situation may be a little bit more medically dire than Chauvin thought. And immediately he should have sought for medical help. That is where I completely agree with the whole world practically, that Chauvin did not help this man in a time of medical distress. And that is when he should have got the damn knee off the neck and said, we need medical attention here. I think he's going into cardiac arrest. But he didn't do that. Manslaughter, absolutely. 100% manslaughter. You can't even argue that. If you do argue that, not up to question your ethics or your morals. Because even I wouldn't go as far. And I take things to the, I like to push things to the boundary. I wouldn't even go as far to say that he should not even have been convicted of manslaughter. Yes, he should have. He should have gotten his knee off the neck. It was gross what he did. It was negligent. And sadly, George Floyd died from it. But we cannot forget all of the events that led up to it. So Candace highlights that when she watched the full tape, she was stunned that the media didn't include all this. That he was high out of his mind. We know that, though. But he was asked to be put on the ground and he was resisting arrest. The media said, and this is where the media controls the false narrative, and this is where the media started to influence the case leading up to it, which I hope never, ever happens again. And we really need to tell the media to shut the hell up as we get closer to these cases. They should not be allowed to do that. They played jury in this situation. Chauvin did not, or the juror did not. The media, Maxine Walters, they played jury duty that day. And leading up for months, they've been playing jury. The media said he was just getting his life together. Bullshit. Someone who runs around high on fentanyl all day, holding up pregnant women, and still trying to pass off fake currency, that's not somebody trying to get their life together. Somebody trying to get their life together is in rehab, staying off the streets, not committing crimes. So bullshit. And to the day he died, he did not have his life together. He committed crimes up to the moment he took his last breath. That's really the deal here. It's not justification for murdering the man or accidentally or negligently causing death, but let's not bullshit here. Let's call it what it is. His life was a mess, and it was criminal to the very last day. But the media, however, said he was just getting his life together. He had moved to Minnesota, yes. He had been in prison in the past month, but he was just helping the youth. What the hell? How is George Floyd helping the youth? That is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And everyone was crying, and oh my gosh, this man is getting a second chance at life, and maybe had the wrong idea or whatever it was using counterfeit bills, and somebody called the police and was killed. He was brutally murdered on the basis that he was black. Bullshit. Nobody can prove that. Nobody can prove that. Derek Chauvin knew George Floyd, I think for years. They knew each other. They had run-ins with each other. Nobody wants to talk about that. They knew each other very well. Okay? To say that he was brutally murdered on the basis that he was black is bullshit. It's a completely false narrative. Nobody has proven that Derek Chauvin is a racist. He might be, but that was not proven, and that's not fair. Owen said, summarizing the dominant media narrative, and then they successfully hid every piece of evidence that would have transformed public opinion. True. If the media wants to play law, if they want to play jury, if they want to play court, then they need to do what the court does. They need to show both sides of the story. But we all know CNN is a propaganda piece of shit news source. We know that. I mean, they suck on all levels. And they're even being busted for it now. We saw the technical director get busted for admitting that CNN is a propaganda outlet. And that they make and manufacture fear just to sway votes and to keep the Democrats in power. It was already admitted. James O'Keefe from Project Virtus came out with a documentary on it. Twitter then shuts him down and cancels his account because they didn't like that. Project Virtus got too close to the truth. That they went undercover and busted a CNN technical director for admitting that. So we all know that CNN is propaganda. We all know that when they try to come out and tell the news, that they're only telling one side. And listen, I hate to call you guys idiots for believing them, but if you believe them, you're an idiot. Sorry. All right? I don't care what you have to say, but CNN does not report both sides. Is Newsmax, Fox any better? It's questionable. I don't think Fox, Newsmax are as devious and as criminal with their intent to falsify or admit facts as CNN is. But I would be a hypocrite to say that Fox News and Newsmax aren't a bit biased themselves towards the other side. Because yes, they are, and that's why I watch them, because I agree with their opinions and their views. I think it's safe to say that there's no such thing as true unbiased journalism today, because they're very biased. I just don't think any of these other outlets are as criminal with their malicious intent as CNN. So Candace Owens has been weighing in. She says, to me, I think the saddest part of this is that what we need to acknowledge is that right now, mob rules. The media creates the mob, and the mob rules, and that's what we just saw play out. So earlier in the show, if you didn't watch the show, it's great. It's on YouTube, but Shapiro, Walsh, Candace, Michael Knowles, the whole crew from the Daily Wire, they went on and they just kind of dissected it. And they spoke law the whole time. They just stuck to the facts, which a lot of Americans aren't doing today. They're ruling with emotion, and it's what we're seeing out of Black Lives Matter and Antifa. It's all emotional. It's all irrational, impulsive decision-making on their part, or opinionating on their part. There's no logic applied to much of this. So it's nice to hear a panel of lawyers actually talk about the case. So Shapiro and Walsh pointed out how the trial could have been compromised and how the jury's decision suggests that it was. You don't have to say that you love what Chauvin did. You don't have to say that Chauvin acted appropriately. You don't have to say any of that stuff. What you do have to say is to not even believe there's reasonable doubt on the murder charges. You do have to say that. You have to say that there's reasonable doubt on the murder charges. On the murder charges where you would have to intent. So you have to have intent. Beyond reasonable doubt, you have to prove that there was intent to murder Chauvin. That there was intent to murder Floyd. I don't believe there was. And most lawyers that at least have a conscience and that aren't trying to push the false narrative on America, I believe that they don't think it was beyond reasonable doubt either. What you have to say is to not even believe there's reasonable doubt on the murder charges. On murder charges where you have to have intent. That suggests to me that this was far less about the actual facts of the case and far more about all the hubbub surrounding the case, Shapiro said. So Shapiro's like, listen, again, this isn't about whether you think Chauvin's a good guy or not, or whether he was an asshole or not, or whether that he was negligent or not. This is about proving that beyond reasonable doubt that he absolutely 100% intended to murder Floyd that day. I don't think anybody's proven that. And that is why a lot of us are are a bit annoyed with the fact that he got murder 1, 2, and manslaughter, which again makes no sense. This trial should have never taken place in Minneapolis, Shapiro says. It should have immediately been transferred in terms of venue. You were not going to find an impartial jury in Minneapolis in the single most publicized criminal justice case of our lifetime, at least since Rodney King. So I don't care if half the jury was black, half the jury was white. Being white today doesn't say shit, okay? Because let's be honest, half the liberals here, they side with wherever the narrative is. They side for wherever they can get the most views and clicks on social media. That's what most of the white liberals side with. They want to think with emotion and be impulsive and get their selfies on camera for the world to see. That's what they're about. They're not really about facts and ruling with the conscience. Walsh then pointed out that the jury was never sequestered or shut off from any outside news or commentary, like they were with the O.J. Simpson case. You remember that? They were in hotel's room, no TVs. So that right there is grounds for appeal because of the amount of influence that this juror had from outside media. They should have been sequestered. They should have been in hotel rooms without any sort of TV, phones, nothing. I'm sorry, that's what it would have taken. In O.J. Simpson's case, we did not have mobile phones. We didn't have social media. So it was very easy. Don't give them cable news. Put a VCR, they can watch videos. This jury should have been sequestered. They should have been put in a hotel room and cut off from the outside world. It would have sucked, but come on, we're talking 3 weeks here. This didn't go on for months. The fact that they deliberated in only 10 hours. 10 hours. You mean to tell me that one of the most influential and most important cases in the world in the last 20 or so years could have been deliberated and come to a conclusion in just 10 hours? That, to me, says they had a lot more to look at or to use than just the facts in the courtroom, meaning they already had this case made up before they walked in the freaking door because the media decided this case. So they should have been sequestered. I absolutely believe and agree with Walsh, Matt Walsh, that they weren't shut off from any outside news or commentary going into deliberations. Before the trial ended, then we had Waters travel to Minneapolis and run her mouth. If this does not go our way, we're going to get more confrontational. We got to get more active. Unless Chauvin was found guilty. Right there, that's influence. The irony is the only verdict we could really trust is an acquittal on all accounts. I think that would have been the right verdict. But it's also the only one you can trust because it's the only one that could not have been motivated by anything but a look at the evidence Walsh said. And again, I think that's because, and I know why he's saying that, because I heard Ben Shapiro talk about it. Of course, they don't think that, I don't think any of these guys think that Chauvin should have gotten completely off. But what they're saying is, it just doesn't make sense that he was acquitted or that he was convicted guilty on all charges. Because from what I understand, and Ben Shapiro touched on this, with this case, you either needed to be convicted of all charges or you needed to be acquitted of all charges. There couldn't have been in between. You couldn't have done 1, 2, and not 3, or 1 but not 2 and 3, or just manslaughter without murder 1 and 2. I believe that he had to have been either convicted fully on all accounts, which would have been wrong legally. It would have contradicted itself. So that's what they're saying, and that's where I agree with Ben Shapiro. If you look at this purely from a logical and legal standpoint, Ben Shapiro's right. The irony in all this is that the only thing that would have made sense in this case is that Chauvin was acquitted on all accounts. Because being convicted on all counts does not make legal sense because, again, you're putting murder 1 and 2 up against manslaughter. Murder 1 and 2 means I intended to do it, or I had premeditated intent. Manslaughter means I accidentally killed somebody. Which one is it, guys? It can't be both. So that's why Ben Shapiro, he said, I knew this was going to be over from the day the trial started because because nobody's going to, this jury, there's no way they're going to acquit him on all 3 charges. No chance. So the only other option would have been to convict him. on all three charges, which is wrong right from the get-go. So I agree with the statement. It's also the only one you can trust because it's the only one that could have been motivated by anything but a look at the evidence. But with this verdict, you have to obviously wonder, is that how they saw it when they investigated the evidence, or are they coming to the decision because they know their lives might be over, might be ruined if they came to any other decision? They know the media is going to leak their identity, and they are going to be looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. Is that why the jury did it? The jury was put in an awful position. They had to either acquit on all three accounts or convict on all three accounts. What juror in their right mind is going to acquit on all three accounts, which would have made sense because conviction on all three accounts absolutely did not make sense. What juror in their right mind is going to acquit on all three accounts? No chance. This trial, from the very beginning, did not stand a chance. And everybody knows it. Any lawyer and any legal counsel with a conscience who has not been brainwashed or influenced or does not support the narrative would very much agree. All the idiots running their mouth on social media who think that we're insane to think like this just don't know how the legal system works. And to be honest, I don't really care about their opinions. Because I don't care about anybody's opinion who rules with emotion here. That's just how I am. I'm a constitutionalist. I have a great respect for law and authority and our legal system. And it's very clear. I don't have to guess. It's very clear what our legal system says about certain matters. It's in black and white. Now, if you want to change those laws, if you want to start to amend these laws to alter how cases are handled in the future, alter how we're supposed to behave in the future, then fine. And when those laws are changed, I'll then applaud and appreciate whatever those changes are. But it's just funny that the knee on the neck was an approved policy by the Minneapolis Police Department until it wasn't an approved policy. And I'm like, wait a second. And I heard the chief of police went on, and I guess he said, well, it wasn't really approved. Hold on a second. Was it approved or not? Because, again, Chauvin used it because it was approved. Until all of a sudden, it wasn't approved. So I'm not sure how that makes sense. What we also don't help with matters, what also is not helping things is when you have idiots like LeBron James running his mouth. LeBron James is just making things worse. Again, you have Maxie Waters. LeBron James has been a big kind of influencer on this entire thing. From not just from this George Floyd case, but from years back. So LeBron James continues to run his mouth. Like many other public figures, James suggests that the Columbus shooting. So now we have the Columbus shooting. Okay. And LeBron James is very quick to weigh in on that. Even though if you don't know what happened, in the Columbus shooting, a black woman was about to stab, I think she was a 15 or 16-year-old girl. The police officer shot the woman with a knife to prevent that woman from stabbing to death the other younger girl. There's outrage. Of course there's outrage. Why would there be outrage? A police officer actually saved one person's life in this case, but unfortunately had to kill another person to save that girl's life. You can't win with these people. That's not good enough for LeBron James. That's not good enough for BLM or the woke mob. They're pissed. They're unbelievable. We are not going to win. They want shootings to 100% stop. Well, that's not going to happen. They want to 100% abolish the police. That's not going to happen. Wake up, people. The police are not going anywhere. Do we need police reform? Absolutely. But I'll tell you right now, someone's running after my son about to stab him to death, you better fucking shoot. And you better shoot to kill. Because anything but that would be 100% unacceptable to me. And I guarantee it was unacceptable to the family who was about to watch their daughter get stabbed to death. So they actually cried, shoot her. You can hear her screaming, shoot her. But once they shot her, now you have people saying, you shouldn't have shot her. And now defund the police is all the rage. Again, so LeBron is out there now, like many other public figures. James suggested that the Columbus shooting was unjustified, coming on the heels of the conviction of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin on murder and manslaughter charges in the death of George Floyd. First of all, LeBron, you need to really shut the hell up, man, and just play basketball, because you're not helping things. You're making things worse. He's now accusing, LeBron James accused, so what he's done is this. Let me just kind of give you the backstory here. He's gone online, okay? LeBron James, he's facing intense backlash over what he now has deleted. He put out this tweet, which is ridiculous. Let me show you the tweet real quick. So as soon as this officer who shot this lady in Ohio, it was Columbus, he saved a black girl's life by shooting the other lady who was about to stab the younger girl. He saved her life. This guy. So what does LeBron James do? He posts a picture of the officer on Twitter and says, "You're next." Nobody should be putting any officer's life in danger like this, no matter what you think. Who the hell comes out and tries to get a cop killed with their influence? If this cop were to get killed, LeBron James should be charged with manslaughter. Because how many people are not? This guy has to go in hiding. He posts this picture, and now you can't take that back. You've already posted it. So LeBron posts this picture of a police officer saying, "You're next," referring to, well, we're coming after you now. You better freaking run. That is disgusting. So understandably, LeBron James is now facing an intense backlash over a now deleted tweet targeting the Columbus police officer involved in the shooting of the 16-year-old Ma'Khia Bryant, who was black. So body footage released Tuesday showed Bryant being shot as she was attacking another teen with a knife. That's exactly the right response you'd expect from any police officer. However, like many other public figures, James suggested that the Columbus shooting was unjustified. How is that possible? How can you suggest that it was unjustified coming on the heels of the conviction? Who cares? So he's saying it was unjustified coming on the heels of the conviction. What does the George Floyd case have anything to do with this case? Completely separate cases. So this is why I continually am disgusted with Black Lives Matter. Because they don't know how to separate each case and look at the facts. Their judgment is so brainwashed, so clouded by whoever's pulling the strings, whoever's leading the charge here, that they aren't able to decide and look at the facts and separate facts from emotion. So already now, they're calling for the head of this police officer in Columbus, Ohio, because of what happened to George Floyd. It's like, how the hell does that make any sense? This is how deranged these people are. And I'm talking about Black Lives Matter organization. I'm talking about the assholes at the top pulling strings, making things worse. I'm not talking about the black community. Love the black community. But I'm talking about the woke mob. I'm talking about the Black Lives Matter organization that, although in the beginning may have had great intentions, have been completely derailed by CNN and the false narrative. So he writes, "You're next, accountability." The NBA icon wrote with an hourglass emoji over an image of one of the officers at the scene of Bryant's shooting. What does that mean exactly, "you're next," with an hourglass? What are you trying to imply, LeBron? Because that, to me, looks like you're influencing a hit on this police officer. Why is this allowed? Why on earth do the left, and I say the left because this is only something the left would ever do. You don't hear these insightful violence coming from the right. And no, I still to this day don't believe Trump ever said. I don't care what you think Trump may have implied. He didn't say it. These idiots don't even try to hide what they mean. They're straight up saying, I want more confrontation. I want to get more active in the streets. LeBron James is calling for a hit on this officer. They're not even trying to hide it. And they're getting away with it. 100%. So where's the threat? Where's the criminal threat charges on LeBron James for saying something like this? I don't care that he deleted it. He said it. So naturally, James was accused by critics of leveraging his massive Twitter following. Yes, he has a massive. He could have caused a lot of damage. LeBron James is inciting violence against an Ohio police officer. This is disgraceful and dangerous. Is the NBA okay with this? Is Twitter? Senator Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas, asks, is Twitter okay with this? Is NBA okay with this? They're taking down any conservative viewpoint off of Twitter. Anybody who gets too close to the truth, they remove. Twitter hasn't removed Antifa groups. They haven't removed Maxine Walters' Twitter account yet. Why haven't they taken down LeBron James? You better believe if I posted that, my account will be offline. Why do the left continue to get special privileges? They continue to run their mouth. They continue to influence very important legal cases, and nobody is standing up against them. This country is now under mob rule mentality. This case, the first thing I said, it's the very first thing I said when this case broke, that I don't care what you think about Chauvin. I don't care what you think about George Floyd. I don't give a shit about any of that, to be honest. My argument, and I'll pull up that post in just a second, my argument has always been over the fact that this case did not stand a chance. From the very beginning, it did not stand a chance. I wrote on my Facebook post the other day, the argument is whether or not I agree with the guilty verdict. It's whether or not I agree with mob rule mentality. And no, I do not. I do not agree with it. I can read you the comments till we're blue in the face, but I'm sure you already know what they are. Some people attacked me. Most supported that. Most supported that, including a few people here. John said the situation doesn't help anybody. Most violent crime is black on black. The cops are afraid to do their jobs or won't do their jobs. Who is it going to hurt? Joshua said the verdict wouldn't have mattered either way. The same outcome was going to ensue riots, violence, unrest, etc. Democracy is just a fancy word for mob rule. People need to lose the idea, perpetrated mostly by politicians, that America was founded as a democracy. It wasn't. We were founded as a constitutional republic. Very different. We've slowly been subverted into a democracy, mob rule. It's time we the people take back the republic. That's what we are. Government for the people, by the people. We are a republic. For all of you out there who are confused, we are not a democracy. We are a constitutional republic. Benjamin Franklin ensured that. And when he came out of the meeting that day, and somebody asked, what's it going to be? What are we? He says, you're a republic, if you can hold on to it. And right now, we are not holding on to anything. We are letting the woke mob, the left, the Democrats, change this country for the worst every day. We are at risk of this country losing its republic. When do we stand up and start fighting for it? Before we end today's show, I want to play a short clip from Grant Stinchfield about how just out of control things are, and they're not going to end. They're radical, but they're even more uninformed. The radical left are very uninformed. Again, it goes back to my argument of when are we going to start thinking with logic and not emotion? Because it's exactly what happened here. We have been forced into thinking with logic. Let's listen to Grant.
The Democrats of today have become more delusional, more radical, and yes, more violent than ever before. Now, the way they choose to get things done is through threats, coercion, and of course, intimidation. The rhetoric is often public calls for violence that is all too often carried out, as we've seen on the streets across America. Today, after watching the response to the Chauvin-Floyd verdict, I actually believe there are Black Lives Matter Antifa street terrorists that are disappointed by this verdict. The reason? They actually wanted to riot last night, and of course they needed an excuse to do it. Last night they didn't get one, but they still turned out to show us all they aren't satisfied.
I'm not an independent, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm a revolutionary.
We're not going to be satisfied. Black Lives Matter isn't a trend, it's a movement. Black Lives Matter forever, okay?
And we are no longer not. We are demanding answers. We are not taking no for an answer.
We can defund the police. And maybe one day we will abolish the police, but we ain't going to do unless we have control over them.
So you see, these anarchists aren't concerned about race or fairness. They want power. They want the public living in fear of what retaliation may come next. It's why facts never matter to them. Look at this latest officer-involved shooting in Columbus, Ohio. The cop who shot and killed a knife-wielding 16-year-old should be hailed as a hero in my mind. He saved the life of the girl in the pink sweats there. The girl he killed, sadly, tried to stab that other girl. It's clear on the video. So as an officer saves a life, tragically being forced to take another life, and still, the Black Lives Matter crew goes crazy, egged on by a devious and uninformed media.
There was no attempt to use pepper spray or a taser, non-lethal force, while a knife can be seen in the footage before the officer fires his weapon.
Can be seen? That's Brian Williams of MSNBC. She's swinging the knife all over the place, trying to stab somebody. Pepper spray is not going to stop that. Use a taser, he says. That is far too risky, by the way, and may not stop the potential killer in time. In this case, watching the video, it's clear. The safest, most effective way to protect innocent life is to use the firearm in this case. But Brian Williams refuses to admit that. You can see it all right there on the video. Because Brian Williams knows an angry cop-hating crowd, whipped into a frenzy that takes to the streets looking to destroy, is, of course, good for ratings. So he interviews cop-hating race baiters like Jason Johnson.
In 22 seconds, he shot her dead. An honor roll student who's making TikTok videos on makeup and hair. This hasn't stopped.
So look, I'm saddened. A 16-year-old resorted to grabbing a knife and tried to kill someone. But I don't care. She just left Build-A-Bear on her way to ballet class. The officer doesn't know her background. And honestly, her background does not matter in all of this. She is clearly seen trying to stab another teenager. Why is this officer now not billed as a man who just preserved life? Instead, they paint him as the enemy. And though the Chauvin guilty verdict may have happened minutes before, like race, it has nothing to do with this case.
So it's a breath of fresh air to hear somebody like Grant talk about the logic and the facts. Like you said, the police officer has no idea her background. She could have been, as Grant said, a ballet dancer and the most peaceful person on the planet. But what she did was wrong, and she attempted to murder somebody else with a knife. The cop shot her. LeBron James now is calling for the police officer's head. The woke mob, they're never going to stop. So now we have this bullshit to look forward to for God knows how many years. Police are going to keep shooting people. If you commit a crime, if it involves a weapon, if you attack a police officer, they have the right to defend themselves and shoot you. If they're going to have to decide whether it's going to be your life or theirs, they're going to take yours because they'd like to get home to their kids at the end of the day. We cannot let mob rule mentality rule our judicial system. We need to put a stop to it, and we need to put a stop to it now. I hope this case does stand a chance for appeal because of what happened, not because I think Chauvin is right, but because I want to set an example to America that never again do we allow the media to influence the decisions of a jury. Never again. They need to stay out of it. Thank you guys so much for watching You Made It Political today. We live stream every morning at 10 a.m. You guys have a great rest of the day.
Thanks for listening to You Made It Political with Matt Clark. Be sure to like, follow, or subscribe to the show, or leave us a review on iTunes. And if you like our show or want to know more, check out YouMadeItPolitical.com.